The first opening statement goes to Mr. Lamont.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And Oz, Bob, good to see you guys again as well. Let me just tell you, for your next governor, you want somebody who's going to be absolutely fearless when it comes to taking on the entrenched interests and shaking up the old way of doing business in Hartford. And that's what I've done my entire life. You know, in business, I took on the big cable TV conglomerates. We beat them by delivering a better service at less cost. We can use some of that entrepreneurial zip when it comes to Hartford. You know, politics, I took on the senior member of my own party when I thought he was wrong about the war in Iraq. Later on, I took on Dan Malloy for the big changes we need to do in this state. Truth be told, this is one of the first times I've had a chance to run against Republicans, a former Republican in Oz and more of a Trump Republican in Bob. I say that because Bob's tax scheme would offer a $1.4 billion tax cut to the 400 richest families in the state. That means higher property taxes for you, a cut in education. I'm going to do just the opposite, cut the property tax, invest in education.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. The next opening statement, Mr. Stefanowski.
Thank you. So we've got 19 days to go, 19 days to probably one of the most important elections in the history of Connecticut. You've got three candidates on stage, but you really have two choices. You've got Oz and Ned, who are more of the same. They want to raise taxes, they want to make bigger government, and they want to drive this economy into another term of Dan Malloy. You've got me, who's been saying for over a year that we need change, lower taxes, small government, a focus on jobs and the economy. Ned likes to say everyone needs to do a little bit more. Everyone is the single mom working 2 jobs to take care of her kids. Everyone are the grandparents leaving the state of Connecticut because they can't afford to stay here. Everyone has done enough. It's time to drive change. It's time to get this economy moving. I'm going to be that agent of change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Griebel.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me take the minute I have to make sure I distinguish between what my record is and what Ned's and Bob's are. Monty and Frank and I have not only lived and worked in the state of Connecticut for 25 years, we have worked for the state of Connecticut in 25 years, and we've gone through that. That's all in terms of things that Monty's done and a number of things and things that I've done. And over that 25 years, we've established a reputation, each of us, for candor, for civility, for collaboration, for inclusion, for integrity, and for transparency. And it's that kind of characteristics, those characteristics that are required to not only promote this state's significant asset base, but to attack these very serious fiscal impediments to returning Connecticut to national preeminence. And only an independent governor and an independent lieutenant governor, not beholden to a party, not beholden to dogma, can bring both parties together, the moderates in both parties and the private sector together, to work in a collaborative way to attack the fiscal impediments we have and return Connecticut to national preeminence on all quality of life matters.
Thank you very much. We're going to go for our first question to Jen Bernstein of Fox, and it goes to Mr. Lamont.
Thank you very much. Good evening, afternoon. Well, back in 2016, the Syrian refugee crisis was really at its peak. A Syrian couple and their 5-year-old son were given clearance to come to the U.S. after waiting for 3 years. Then Indiana Governor Mike Pence closed the door on this family. Governor Malloy accepted the family. If you were in Malloy's position, what would you have done?
I would have accepted that family. I think this is a state that welcomes. This is a state with open arms. And this is not a state where Trump values, we keep people out, we put up a wall, my way or the highway. That's not the way I would do it at all. I would tell you that I say, as I go around the state of Connecticut, which I do a lot these days, there are a lot of people that don't feel like they belong. There are folks who after Charlottesville felt that this was a country that didn't really understand people like them. It was folks that felt after mothers being torn from their kids in the Rio Grande felt that this was a state or a country that didn't understand people like them. Just last week with the Kavanaugh hearings, I heard a lot of women, young women, say, I don't think this is a country that understands people like me any longer. So I want you to know that as governor, you know, I am going to be welcoming. I support strong borders. I support legal immigration, but also respect the diversity, which is what makes this state extraordinary. So I want to be a governor who's welcoming to each and every one of the folks that want to come to this state. I'm going to make sure that they have an opportunity to learn. I'm going to make sure they have an opportunity to become good tax-paying members of our community.
Mr. Griebel?
Thank you. Yeah, Jen, I would have done the same thing as Governor Malloy. I think what's happened with the federal government with the lack of 30 years of the Congress and presidents failing to adopt appropriate immigration laws has put the states in an untenable position. Having said that, respect for the individuals at the core of this country. It's at the core of Connecticut. It's at the core of our campaign and our administration. The notion of supporting appropriate security along both borders, obviously it's a federal issue, but certainly we support that. But the notion that every person who's in this country is protected by the rule of law is important to the Griebel-Frank administration, and it's the way we would handle situations like that when they come up in the future.
Mr. Stefanowski?
I do think we should support people that are here legally. The diversity of our state and our country is one of our biggest assets, but I don't think sanctuary cities are the way to do it. We cannot pick and choose what federal laws we decide to enforce and which ones we don't. It's a slippery slope. If you want to change the law, we should change that, but for the time being, we need to obey the law as written.
Mr. Stefanowski, would you have accepted that family?
I'm not familiar with the circumstances, but my gut would be yes.
Do we have time for a follow-up to that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So we were just talking about refugees who are here legally, talking about folks who are here illegally. We have people, as we speak, holed up in churches right now. I know Mr. Stefanowski just touched on this with sanctuary cities, but what side of the fence would you be with people who are scared about being deported?
Mr. Lamont?
I'd err on the side of being generous. These are people who are fleeing persecution. They're fleeing warfare. That's just what our country has meant all along. Not people who are abusing the system, but who are fleeing for their lives. So yes, I would be welcoming in terms of that. These poor folks, the guy that's in the church in New Haven hasn't been able to see his child in quite some time right now, an Hispanic individual that's fearful that he's going to be deported. I think this is a state that is welcoming. We honor the rule of law, but a state that's welcoming.
Oz?
I would just say that I'll repeat what I said a minute ago, that everybody in this country is entitled to protection under the rule of law. So ensuring that there's adequate legal representation for everyone in any kind of a deportation matter is absolutely critical. This issue of being humane is at the heart of this state. Yes, I understand the point that we've got to honor we have to cooperate with the federal government. But the notion of making sure that people are treated humanely and have the protection of law, to me, are the key of how to deal with these very difficult issues that Congress has punted on for the better part of 3 decades.
Could I just ask you, Mr. Stefanowski, to just clarify your position on sanctuary cities in the state, given that municipalities have an opportunity to in some ways, enforce laws the way they see fit with their police force?
Yeah, again, I think the law is pretty clear. The law should be enforced. And I agree with both these gentlemen. We shouldn't be ripping families apart. We need to have empathy. We need to try to do the right thing for people here, but we need more control over immigration to begin with. We have to exercise some balance and some reasonableness, and we have to run the state appropriately.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from Keisha Grant of NBC Connecticut, and it will go to Oz Griebel.
Thank you. This question comes from the youth at Hartford Communities That Care. We know people of color face inequities every single day when it comes to educational opportunities and higher incarceration rates, especially among young black men. What type of innovations do you advocate to try to tackle this problem?
Well, the best thing I think a governor can do, Keisha, on a number of these things is engage the people who are engaged in this work, and that's things like Project Longevity that's been implemented here in Hartford and New Haven and in Bridgeport, making sure that there is those programs are appropriately funded so that we reduce the incidence of violence. We know that we have to engage the faith community in many of these cities because they're often the glue that keeps families together and provides the leadership and the inspiration for folks there. And we have to have honest conversations about how we're funding education across the board. We all know that if you're not reading by grade level, by 3rd grade, your likelihood of incarceration goes up dramatically. At the same time, we've got to, on the other end, when someone has been incarcerated, give Governor Malloy a lot of credit for the Second Chance program, making sure that we're partnering with the Department of Corrections. I think Commissioner Semple has done a very admirable job of moving things in that direction so that when people are paroled, that they're coming back with skills and they're coming back to an opportunity to earn a livelihood for themselves, earn a livelihood for their families, so that the likelihood of recidivism drops dramatically. Those are a number of things. You get into the school issue, which may come up in one of the latter questions, how we get at that on a number of fronts. How we take a look at things like charter schools, which give parents choice and things along those lines. It's a little farther afield, but all these issues are integrated at the end of the day. You just don't slice off one aspect like the prison system or one aspect like the education system and say, all we're going to do is pursue that. You've got to bring the right people to the table to understand how, and particularly in an urban neighborhood where maybe children don't have two parents, or their parent hasn't gone to school, or this neighborhood isn't safe. This has to be done in a much more comprehensive, sustained way. Build on some of the successes of the past, but then keep moving in that direction.
Mr. Stefanowski?
Yeah, so I'm a product of the public schools. I went to North Haven High School. It was a terrific experience. I had a great career here with General Electric and UBS, and the public schools were great for me. But I do think we need more around accountability. Connecticut's spending 2 times the national average for K1 to K12. Test scores are not the be-all, end-all, but our scores are average. So we're spending more for average results. I think early childhood education is important. Get these kids at the start. School choice, magnet schools, charter schools, the public schools. But again, the best way to fund education in this state is not more taxes. We got to lower taxes. We got to get this economy moving. We have to grow. That's going to provide more revenue in the medium term to fund education and health care and all the other things that this state desperately needs.
Mr. Lamont?
Well, Keisha, yeah, I do want to be the education governor, and I do salute what Malloy did in terms of second chance and getting the community colleges into our correctional facilities and giving these folks a real opportunity so when they get out they can become productive members of our state and society. And it has brought down recidivism, and the crime rate is an all-time low, and it's saving the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Specifically on education, let me give you an idea. Many years ago, I was a volunteer teacher at Harding High School in Bridgeport. In Bridgeport, in many of our cities, the overwhelming majority of the kids there are children of color. And we only have 8% of our teachers across the state are teachers of color. And frankly, Keisha, very few of them are guys. And I would do everything I could to incent more people to get into teaching and more of them to be able to go to our toughest school districts to make sure each and every one of these kids gets the very best opportunity. So if you go to teach in a Harding High School, you go to teach in some of these toughest districts, we forgive your student loan if you've been there for 5 years. That's a way that we can get the very best teachers going to those school districts, giving these kids the very best opportunity.
It begs the follow-up question, gentlemen, and I've heard from 2 of you, the Governor's Second Chance program. Connecticut's prison population currently at its lowest level in about 22 years. We've seen one of the biggest drops in violent crime in Connecticut in the nation in recent years. How do you plan to continue Governor Malloy's success on this issue, this particular front, if you're elected governor?
I'm not sure that I do anything different than making sure, as I said a minute ago, Keisha, that the funding is there, that you're bringing private sector leaders in with Department of Corrections, keep building the partnerships, strengthening the partnerships that are there. I mean, there's nothing like building on success. So there's more that needs to be done, certainly. But the idea that you've got a strong foundation there and leveraging it, to me, is what our administration would focus on. We'd also look at the issue of some of the racial profiling. You mentioned, I thought the question was actually going down a slightly different matter in terms of the percentage of people of color who are incarcerated. And some of the laws that are passed that have an inherent racial bias to us. I know recent laws have been passed to make sure that there's an evaluation of new legislation when it's passed to make sure it does not have an inappropriate impact on people of color. It's got to be part of the way we move the state forward on a number of things. And looking at things as we down the road of exactly the idea of how we handle the bail system so that people aren't put in jail because they can't afford bail. I mean, there are a number of things that I think the state has made significant progress on that we can continue to build on in the next 4 years.
Mr. Stefanowski, how would you build on that success that has meant many fewer people are in prison than were there 8-10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for giving people a second chance, particularly young people after their first offense. We should absolutely do everything we can to get people back on track and give them a second chance. But this early release program is out of control. The recidivism rate, the number of people that go back to prison is over 50%. We had the incident on the New Haven Green a few weeks ago with the contaminated drugs. One of the dealers of those drugs was arrested 37 times. We had the mass murder in Griswold by someone who was let out of prison early. I'm all for second chance. I'm all for giving people the right to correct themselves, but the safety of our communities comes first. I'm not sure the cost of law enforcement has come down. If you look at the all-in cost, I think it's gone up. We can look at early release, but the program needs to be modified.
I think the second chance is working. I think crime is at an all-time low. I think recidivism is down because we're giving people a second chance. We're giving them training, giving them an opportunity going forward. So I would continue on that plan carefully. I'd just like to say one other thing. I would take a look at some of the other laws out there. I look at the marijuana laws right now. I know how they can be unequally applied. And I think they can also harm disproportionately people of color. So that's one of the reasons I don't just want to decriminalize, but I would like to legalize that, carefully regulate it over a period of time, in part because of the discriminatory effect it has on young people and how it sets so many of them back.
Mr. Stefanowski, you want to jump in?
I mean, I just have to object to that. People say crime's at an all-time low. Maybe the number of incidents is down, but you know what's happening? The population's at an all-time low. When you're losing 80 people a day, yeah, the number of crimes is going to come down. And if we keep going with this economy the way it is, there's not going to be anybody here left. So yeah, the number of crimes may be down, but this program has proven to be a failure. It needs to be modified. We need to put the safety of our law-abiding citizens first and foremost.
I said, our population is up over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years.
80 people a day we're losing.
Adding even more.
Because of the economic policies at Dan Malloy that you want to continue.
Or even coming into the state.
We go on forever.
We could actually go on forever. Keisha, did you have any other follow-ups?
No.
Okay. We're going to move on then to our third question from Dennis House of WFSB, and it's going to go to Bob Stefanowski.
Thank you, John. Gentlemen, Governor Malloy has appointed dozens of judges and several Supreme Court justices during his 8 years in office. With the mandatory retirement of Justice Richard Palmer in 2020, you, if elected, will have to appoint his replacement. Are there any names of candidates you have in mind? And what kind of justice would you nominate? And how does your philosophy on the judicial branch differ from that of Governor Malloy?
Well, first of all, we need to look at the total number of judges. There's a lot of vacancies throughout the system, and just because there's vacancies doesn't mean we need to fill them all. At UBS, I used zero-based budgeting, and it was not a quota system where we had to fill roles, so we need to look at the number. In terms of appointing the next judge, we need to find somebody with the appropriate legislative experience. It's not the formal general counsel to the governor of the city, of the state. We need someone with high integrity, we need somebody smart, and we need somebody who will interpret the Constitution as it's written, not be an activist judge that's going to try to rule from the bench and change law. We need to follow the Constitution as written, we need to have discipline, and we need to have quality judges with integrity.
Ned Lamont?
I think it's important that we continue to fill these judicial seats. As somebody who spent his life in business, let me tell you, if the court system slows down, bogs down, that makes life impossible for people who are trying to get contracts, trying to adjudicate and move forward. And I would say, look, I would cast a wide net in terms of the folks I look for as judge. I want people of integrity. I want people who know the system. But I know that, for example, less than 5% of our judges self-identify as Hispanic right now. And I want to have a court system that sort of reflects the folks here in the state of Connecticut, so people know that this is a system that is working on their behalf, something that they can trust. So I'd be very careful to make sure we have the top qualified, diverse judicial system.
Dennis, I don't have any names involved. One of the great strengths, the many strengths of this ticket, though, is that Monty Frank is a past president of the Connecticut Bar Association. So clearly we would reach out to the Bar Association to identify candidates that they have. The idea of making sure you throw the net wide to be sure that we're getting the right types of people to take a look at. I don't have a particular judicial philosophy that I know would differ from Governor Malloy's. I think quality people is what you're looking for, someone who's had probably I'd have a bias to someone who's has had trial experience, either as a lawyer or as a judge, so that someone sitting through has a real genuine understanding of many of the issues that will come before the Supreme Court from a trial perspective and from an appellate court's perspective. But the beauty of this ticket, as I said, is that that's one of the things that Monty has done. He has been involved in background in looking at candidates for judgeships, I don't think necessarily in the Supreme Court, but on the Superior Court, and that's a great asset that he brings to this ticket, and it'll strengthen our ability to identify the right person, ultimately to submit to the legislature to replace Judge Palmer.
As you know, Governor Malloy's first choice for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was voted down. Was that the right move?
Yes.
Why?
Didn't have the right legislative experience, was the governor's chief counsel, was an activist judge that wasn't going to follow the Constitution. It was the appropriate thing to turn him down.
I think it was the wrong decision. I think he was highly qualified, and we should stop playing politics with these nominations.
The best thing I can say, Dennis, is you need to count the votes in advance. I think they've gone through that process was harmful across the board. And if you don't have the votes in hand, I would not have nominated them to begin with.
One more?
Absolutely.
You've all talked about budget cuts if elected governor. Will there be cuts in the judicial branch, and where would they be cut?
I think if you look at total costs in any of these branches, Dennis, taking a look at, and I'm not an expert in terms of staffing across the board, but looking at the openings we have today, does every opening have to be filled? I also, one of the things that I think we have to look really hard at across the board, not just in the judicial branch, is the qualification for lifetime pensions. For serving after a brief period of time. You come in after it's mandatory retirement 70, you're there a couple of years. I believe you don't even need to be there 10 to get the bulk of the pension, the health care. I think these things are the cost of the state have to be looked at. In terms of the equity and whether we've got the right number of judges, I would want to work with Monty, work with the Bar Association to say, do we have the right number of judges in here? If we don't, do we need to fill all the open slots that are currently there?
I'd only add that we cut back on the number of probate judges a lot over the last 7 years, and that has not harmed justice and what we're trying to do. But I say again, as a business person, nothing is worse than a sluggish, slow judicial system. Sometimes you need to get answers. So I'd be very careful, Dennis, before I talked about just willy-nilly cutting from the Justice Department. I think it's very important we have the courts fully staffed.
Me?
Yeah.
Dr. John.
Please.
Yeah, a true business person does look at cost. A true business person does not fill roles just because there was a quota from the last year. A true business person starts with how many do we need? What are the right qualifications? Can we do with a few less? A true business person looks at the bottom line. A person who wants big government blindly fills roles year after year that may or not be needed, and he charges those costs to the hardworking taxpayers of Connecticut rather than finding efficiencies that we can spread and give back to the people.
Thank you. Our next question is from Keith Koontz of WTNH, and it's going to go to Ned Lamont.
Sir, good afternoon. In recent years, our state has lost General Electric to Boston, almost lost Aetna headquarters to New York City. We have seen very bold attempts by other states like Florida to lure other Connecticut companies away. What is your plan to make Connecticut as business-friendly as possible in the face of this kind of competition from other states, and what is your detailed plan to accomplish that?
So, Keith, after GE left, we got the leaders of GE together with the political leaders and the business leaders and the labor leaders to see what we could learn. You know, they didn't leave for Mississippi. They didn't leave necessarily for a low-tax state. They left for Massachusetts. And they told me they left for Massachusetts because, one, they couldn't get the talent they needed here in the state of Connecticut. And two, if they could get that talent, they had a hard time getting them to the office because of gridlock traffic. So two priorities I heard coming out of that meeting is, one, make sure you work every day with the major employers in the state, as well as the small business. Make sure we're training people for the jobs that are out there right now. We have tens of thousands of jobs that we can't fill. Shame on us because we're not training those people for those jobs. That was one of the reasons that I was so happy when we were able to attract Infosys, a major IT company, to come right here to Hartford and training people with IT skills. And that's one of the many reasons that Aetna turned around the moving vans. Number two, you need a governor who's going to be serious about fixing our transportation system. We have gridlock in this state right now. And what I'm going to do is we can't rely on the gasoline tax anymore. That's become prohibitive. So we do a toll on tractor-trailer trucks only. That's $250 million to fix those bridges that allows our rail service to pick up, extend service around the state. Two things that were so important to GE. And finally, I've got to be able to tell people you're going to have an honestly balanced budget so we don't go through fiscal hell every 2 years. You can't do that if you say, I'm going to take $11 billion out of the budget, details to follow. That's the exact wrong way to go. First thing I do is get you that honestly balanced budget, no increase in income tax, hold the line on taxes, reduce spending in a serious way, and make sure that the business community knows we've got our fiscal house in order.
Mr. Griebel?
I'll take the GE example as to maybe play that out. Had I won the governorship in 2010, I said during that campaign, and I've said all the years I've been in the state, both at Bank of Boston and at the Metro Hartford Alliance, the governor has to be the chief marketing officer for the state. And what I mean by that, if you believe the old adage that your next best customer is your current customer, you have to spend a lot of time with the employers who are here. Our legacy employers, the UTCs, the Hartfords, the Pitney Bowes, as well as all the small businesses that are here. Make sure you take the time to listen to them. Make sure you take the time to tell them that they're loved, that the taxes they pay are appreciated, the taxes that their employees pay are appreciated, that the investment that they make in their plant and equipment and research is appreciated. We've taken the private sector for granted far too long, which has opened us up to 49 other governors coming in regularly to court people. We're in a competitive world for jobs and for capital investment. If you don't see yourself in competition, then you are going to get rolled as we go forward. In the GE example, using that, I would have hoped I would have developed a relationship with senior people at GE relatively early on. And if they told us they were having these kinds of problems about transportation, which we all know we have transportation issues, but having issues about attracting the right talent, I would say, well, before you put the RFP out for Chicago and Atlanta and Boston, wherever you're looking, let's sit down and take a look at it. We'll buy your property in Fairfield. We'll take that off. You won't have to worry about it. We'll be responsible for buying and finding commercial buyers to make sure that the property stays on the tax rolls, not contributed to Sacred Heart. Let's come into New Haven. Let's see if we can find a place. Work with people like Bruce Alexander, who was a real driver at Yale in terms of the renovation of New Haven. See if there was a location in New Haven itself. Let's strengthen the partnerships with Yale, with Albertus Magnus, with Southern, with the University of New Haven. Let's talk about the possibility of putting a UConn campus in New Haven. And oh, by the way, you're still on Metro North. You have access to New York. You don't have to move anybody out. Now, they may have still said, take a hike. But if we don't come in and have that conversation, then you're not going to have that. That's what I mean by being the chief marketing officer for the state of Connecticut.
Mr. Stefanowski?
Yeah, so I could spend my whole 15 minutes on this one, but let me start with GE. I'm not sure who Ned met with, but you know why GE left? Because of the worst economic policy over the last 8 years under Dan Malloy. We need to get the corporate tax rate down to keep companies like GE here. You know why GE left? Because of horrible regulatory pressures on the business. You know why GE left? Because when Dan Malloy came out for the final meeting with GE to try to convince them to stay, he started the PowerPoint presentation with a picture of a jet engine. And unfortunately, it was a Pratt & Whitney jet engine, not a GE jet engine. You know why GE left? Because they didn't have a business person leading this state. Look at what Charlie Baker has been able to do in Massachusetts. We need a business person to run this state, not another politician. Let me touch on emphasis for a minute. Mr. Lamont loves to brag about emphasis, how he brought it to Hartford. I'm not sure if you saw the New York Times article this week, Mr. Lamont. Emphasis made $2 billion last year. And he asked the taxpayers of Connecticut to pay $14 million to incent them to come to Connecticut. Emphasis was slapped with the largest fine in the entire country for bringing people in illegally on H-1B visas, putting people in Connecticut out of work. The people are training people from overseas to come in. They're taking over their jobs, and we're putting Connecticut people out of work. Finally, on tolls. I've got one guy on the left that wants to toll people that carpool in the HOV lanes. That's the idea. Let's toll people who actually carpool. I got a guy in the middle that just wants to put tolls on out-of-state tractor trailers. Do you really believe if we go through all the trouble to get tolls approved and put up the technology that every worker in Connecticut is not going to be going through 2 or 3 tolls on their way to work? And by the way, that same philosophy is being litigated in Rhode Island right now because it's against interstate commerce. No tolls, lower taxes, skilled workforce, a business person running the state. That's what we need to do to keep companies like GE in Connecticut.
Would you be totally against offering a tax incentive to a company that was considering leaving the state of Connecticut as an incentive to stay? Is that something you'd consider?
We have to start playing offense, Keith. The problem with our governor is he waits for somebody to decide to leave, and then he tries to bribe them to stay. We need to lower our corporate tax rate. We need to reduce regulation. We need to get our infrastructure going. We need to work with the community colleges and the trade schools to get the skill sets that people need.
But you can't do that overnight.
Well, we can start very quickly, and we can reduce that corporate tax rate, and we can give companies and businesses a way to be here. We can get growth going again in this state, but it's not by putting yet another tax, yet another toll on corporations and people in our state. We've proven it doesn't work over the last 8 years. These guys are more of the same. I'm going to change it.
Osgood, I think you're next. I know you want to jump in, but Oz, you're next in line. Would you like to?
I answered the question.
Yeah, okay. Ned Lamont, did you want to respond?
You did. I asked a follow-up about would you be willing?
If the question's in the first five, no, I'm not in favor generally. The first five, I think tax dollars ought to be invested in transportation and education that's available to everybody.
What about tax incentives as a way of keeping a company that's considering leaving to stay here?
The only thing I have to say, you have to have an honest discussion about what the impact of that is in two ways. An impact, we got a $4.6 billion operating deficit that hasn't come up yet in this conversation, and you're going to give it an entity another tax break. Well, where is the money going to come from to offset that? And I'm also very concerned, given the history of the last 10 years, that when you give one entity a tax break, the next company's coming in, where's mine? And I've heard it in the 10 years I've been here, over the last 8 to 10 years. The other thing, just quickly, I know this time is so precious. God, it fleets away. The HOV lane, with all due respect to Bob, my point about tolling the HOV lanes is as a pilot. And obviously, those of you come in carpools, we'll make sure we find a way that you're not penalized for that. The idea, if we don't have a serious discussion about funding our transportation infrastructure, when we've stolen the gasoline tax out of the Special Transportation Fund for 15 years, we've got real problems on our hands. And if we're not willing to have a serious discussion about how we're going to fund it, some of these problems are going to come back to bite us, not just in the economic world, but there could be serious safety issues involved. So to me, this notion about just poo-pooing because it's a cost when a toll is assessed against everybody who drives through Connecticut, not just Connecticut residents, to me is a big deal.
We got a pilot over here. We got out-of-state tractor trailers
here. And you have no
here.
solutions, Bob.
Trust me, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yeah, and trust me.
Gentlemen, please, I want to go to Mr. Lamont, who raised his hand.
Through tolls all day long.
Thank you for a second. Mr. Lamont, go ahead.
Let me just mention to Bob that when GE moved to the state of Connecticut, we had one of the highest corporate income tax rates in the country. It is down from where it was back then. So for him to say everything is related to the corporate income tax is wrong. For him to say we're going to eliminate the income tax and turn it back to the way it was before 1990, back when we had one of the highest corporate income tax rates in the world. Taxes are important, but so is transportation, so is education, so is getting it right. And by the way, the incredible disrespect I just heard about a company called Infosys. It's an amazing company. They are training hundreds of people right. Can I just finish if you don't mind?
Residents by the day.
If you could just let me finish, I'd appreciate it. They are training hundreds of people right here, get up to 1,000 people, Connecticut people for Connecticut jobs, making sure that this state has the folks with the IT skills they need to continue to attract good-paying businesses to the state. So to disrespect, one of the leaders of Infosys is right here, right now. So to hear what could be the next governor of the state diss them and diss what they mean to the state is not a way to open up the welcome mat to new companies.
I've had calls and emails from 3 to 5 people over the last few weeks, people that are training people who have come in from overseas. They're training them for 3 to 4 weeks. Then they get an exit package. They leave, and the person from overseas takes their job. Unfortunately, it's a fact, Ned.
Mr. Lamont, just very quickly to Keith's follow-up question, would you extend tax incentives to companies like GE to try to keep them here? Charlie Baker, that he mentioned before, Massachusetts put a big tax incentive on the table for GE to take. Would you do the same sort of thing to keep companies here?
We don't lead with that, and that's our problem as a state. We're sort of leading with the incentives, leading with the giveaways. That's no way to keep and attract good businesses here. When we were competing with Rhode Island for Infosys, you know what Rhode Island said? Rhode Island said, we'll match any incentive that Connecticut puts on the table. Now let me tell you why you ought to be in Rhode Island. That's how we compete. Have the best trained workforce in the world. Have our fiscal house in order, and make sure we have a transportation system that works.
We're going to have time maybe for our panelists to ask another quick question in a moment. I want to get to something with Oz Griebel quickly. Oz, I'm sure that you and the rest of Connecticut read this report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change last week.
Right.
It basically says that climate change is becoming a bigger problem even faster than we thought. Right. Yale has studied this, and when they look at how people feel about climate change, about 60% of people in Connecticut think that the governor of the state should do something about it. What do you think the governor of the state should do about climate change?
Well, I think there's certainly issues around the shoreline. We're working with our property and casualty companies, with UConn at Avery Point. I mean, I don't quote me because I'm sure I've got this number somewhat wrong, but we've got rising sea levels right along our shoreline. And we've had the last two major storms. Is the policy to rebuild there? I think that needs to be a serious discussion. On a more positive way, the great thing about this state is we've got tremendous intellectual capital in areas dealing with renewable energy and on issues that dealing with the rising sea levels. To me, there's an opportunity here not only to leverage that research, whether it's at UConn, whether it's at Yale, whether it's at the Fuel Cell Corporation out in Danbury, take advantage of this extraordinary intellectual capital we have so we get the proverbial 2-for-4. We deal with some of the issues here in the state of Connecticut, and we provide a leadership role. What I've said is that when I talk about restoring Connecticut, the national preeminence, that's what I'm talking about. The Connecticut, all 49 other states want to look at Connecticut. The rest of the world wants to look at Connecticut because we've established the standard that everybody wants, and that includes dealing with the issues of renewable energy and climate change.
Mr. Stefanowski?
Yeah, it's a problem. To Oz's point, people on the shoreline may feel it first. We need to do something about it. We need to incentivize the private sector to come in and develop new technologies. I've met with 2 companies this morning that are focused on green energy. They're not asking for government subsidies. They're asking for a level playing field. What does our governor do? He uses a big government approach. He creates a green energy fund. He taxes all people. He puts it into a green energy fund. He raises $10 million. What does he do with it when the general fund has a deficit? He raids it. We absolutely have to focus on climate change. It is a much broader issue than Connecticut. It's a federal issue. It's an international issue. But with respect to Connecticut, we need to encourage green energy. We need to let the private sector compete and solve the solution, not another big government excuse like Ned and Oz will propose.
Mr. Lamont.
Donald Trump is dismissive of climate change. Bob Stefanowski says, I don't know enough about the science. And yes, a governor can make an extraordinary difference in drawing a line in the sand. We're a small state. We're congested. We have coal dust flying in from other parts of the country, depositing here, what that means in terms of asthma and such. Look, the Trump car efficiency bill was extraordinary. The automobile industry supported it. It was good, long-term goals, and they were building to that. And instead, President Trump said, no, we're going to end those efficiency standards, and no, Connecticut and California and other states cannot have higher standards. You want a governor who's going to fight for Connecticut values and Connecticut standards. So the degree to which it's the environment, the degree to which it's right to choose, the degree to which it's guns, you want a governor who's going to stand up and protect our values here in the state of Connecticut.
I'm going to ask for quick questions and quick answers, and I'll start with Jen Bernstein. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. One of your first jobs as governor will be to deliver a budget to the legislature in February. We have a multi-billion-dollar projected deficit for 2019. Will you be able to do it without gimmicks or one-time fixes like the rainy day fund? How will you do that?
Mr. Stefanowski, you've got the first answer here.
Well, you know why we have the rainy day fund to begin with is because of fundamental tax reform at the national level. It just shows you what a little common sense around lowering taxes rather than raising them like the 2 other people on our panel want to do. So thank goodness we have it. We need to cut cost. When I was at UBS, we did a thing called zero-based budgeting. I had every single department come in, and I'll do the same thing my first week in office. I will declare a state of fiscal emergency. I'll have every one of these departments come in, and the discussion will be, your budget's zero. How about that for an idea? I don't care what you had last year. I don't care how many open positions there are. We're starting at 0, and we're only going to add back in what we absolutely have to have. I did it at UBS. I took 10% of the cost base out in the first year. That's $1 billion. We have to address the state employee pension plan. There are a ton of very hardworking state employees that have religiously contributed to that plan for decades. We have to try to preserve their retirement. But on the other hand, I am not doing the state employees any benefit. I'm not doing the state of Connecticut any benefit by ignoring that we have a $100 billion problem like Mr. Lamont wants to do. Those checks are going to start to bounce. We need to have security for existing retirees. Maybe we also offer a defined contribution plan, but we need to attack that. The third thing, Jen, is we need to reprioritize. Look at what Governor Malloy did with the bonding a few weeks ago. He bought a property in Orange, Connecticut for $5 million that was worth $500,000. How does that happen? A business person doesn't do that. How does he have the authority to do it? That's what's driving the taxpayers of Connecticut crazy. They don't mind having tax money taken if it's used for good purposes, but they hear this story, so we'll reprioritize. We have a bus, and I go on for hours. We have a bus from Britain to Hartford that costs $600 million for a 9-mile bus route, $1,000 an inch. You know how I'm going to get rid of that budget deficit? We're going to start to run the state of Connecticut like a business with budgeting, accountability, and responsibility over your money.
Mr. Lamont?
Well, let's get back to your question, Jen. Are we going to be able to solve this without resorting to a lot of one-shot deals and gimmicks? And both Bob and Oz have talked about using the rainy day fund. That's the exact wrong thing to do. They're talking about deferring contributions to the pension fund. That's the exact wrong thing to do. That's just what Jody Rell, that's just what John Rowland, that's just what other governors done for years, and that's one of the many reasons we're in this incredible mess we are right now. First thing you do, and you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Bob Stefanowski, another $11–12 billion cut. He says, I'll pay for it with zero-based budgeting. You have to have a budget ready to go in about 110 days, Bob. And right now, your zero-based budgeting is zero. It's a blank piece of paper. That, you want to know what makes the business community nervous, is knowing that we could have just more of this fiscal ineptitude and fiscal turbulence, the same type of thing that's cost this state for so many years. I'm going to be the one person that gets there and deals with the structural deficit head on. I'm going to deal with the health care and do what I can to bring down the cost there, especially when it comes to pharma. I'm going to work collaboratively with labor and look at the pension fund, find a way to stretch that out and do something on the asset side so you know what our obligations look like and we take care of that in a serious way. I'm going to deal with shared services and tough love with our mayors, but make sure you know that we can no longer afford to subsidize inefficiency any longer. Talk about education. We're one of the few states that pays for more teachers outside the classroom than teachers in the classroom. I'm going to do everything I can to give you confidence that I'm going to bring down the high cost of government without raising the income tax, without raising sales taxes, and get it done in that first year. To put it off with rainy day funds and deferring contributions to the pension fund is more of the same that got us into this mess.
Just a quick question? You want a quick answer, right?
Well, you got 4 minutes left to talk.
Last to the end, so it's the gorilla in the room, right?
Right.
The notion of the $40.4 billion operating deficit, $4.6 billion operating deficit, and a $40.4 billion budget. Remember, on July 1st at 12:01 a.m., about 40% of that budget is already allocated to debt service, pension funding, and state retiree health care. So you're not talking about balancing $4.6 billion on $40 billion. You're talking about balancing on about $27 or $28 billion. If you're not going to use the rainy day fund, then what are you going to do? You can't lay state employees off. Are you going to cut municipal aid more? Are you going to cut aid to agencies that are serving the most vulnerable around us? There are no choices in here that are easy. These are very difficult, serious issues. It's not child's play about cutting taxes or saying we're not going to use the rainy day fund. If you're not going to use the rainy day fund in a deluge, when are you going to use it? That's what it's there for. We've got to look at this budget over the next 3 or 4 budget cycles. And what I mean by, and in this first one, do as little harm as possible. That's why I would use the rainy day fund. That's why I would look at deferring certain contributions that don't have to be made in this biennium to give us some breathing room so we don't have to attack municipal aid. We don't have to underfund agencies that are serving the most vulnerable around us. That's a key element of what we're trying to get done.
And Mr. Stefanowski, please go next, and we're going to be shortening the amount of time because we're running low on time. Please go ahead.
You listen to both of these guys. It's more taxes. It's high-level ideas about what we're going to cost. You know how we're going to get out of this budget deficit? Is growth. If the state of Connecticut had grown at the same amount as the national economy over the last 6 years, we'd have $12 billion more of tax revenues. We wouldn't have a deficit. And you know why we're growing significantly less than the national economy? Because of fundamentally flawed tax policy. We need to reduce the state income tax. We need to reduce the corporate tax. We need to fight tolls tooth and nail, and we need to get this economy moving. You cannot cut your way to prosperity. No one's ever been able to do it. We got to get this economy growing. My plan gets the economy growing. These two guys, it's 4 more years of Dan Malloy.
Bob's plan will stop our economic growth dead in its tracks. It will put us through every 2 years of fiscal hell. We're not going to have a balanced budget as far as the eye can see. And yeah, Jen, we will be papering things over and playing games. That's no way to get this economy going. The Fiscal Stability Commission started out with the words fiscal stability and economic growth. First thing I got to do is reduce the cost of government, hold the line on taxes, and get us to an honestly balanced budget. Then we can start about cutting taxes from there.
When you talk about reducing the cost of government, can I just ask you, be specific about what you're going to reduce in the cost of government day one, month one?
Day one, I sit down and we find real reforms on health care. That's 25% of the budget, John, 25% of the budget. And as I look at that, I look at both Medicaid and I look at the state employee plan. There are significant savings there. I already mentioned the fact that Massachusetts and other states have brought down the cost of pharma dramatically by going out to bid. We should team with Rhode Island. We should team with Massachusetts and go out and use our purchasing power to bring down those costs. There's one very specific idea that could save us hundreds of millions of dollars.
What are you going to do sort of cut the cost of government?
I got to tell you, 5 minutes ago, we need to fill every open judicial spot we have, whether we need it or not. Now I'm going to cut costs. I don't know what side of the table you're on, Ned. It's very, very hard to follow.
How are you going to cut costs in the state of Connecticut?
We will have every department come in. We will exercise zero-based budgeting. We have a $40 billion biannual budget. Does anybody in the audience or anybody at home think I can't find 5 to 10% of waste, fraud, and abuse in the state of Connecticut government?
Give us a couple of examples.
That's $4 billion that we can use to fund a tax cut. We can use to get this economy moving, and we can bring jobs back to Connecticut. We cannot cut cost our way out of this. We have to grow the economy. We've been living with more cost for 8 years. I'm the one who's going to change it. These guys are the same.
Jen, quickly.
Going to use the rainy day fund? Is that the plan?
We'll have to look at it, Jen. We will have to look at it. I'd hate like heck to do it. We'll see how much cost we can take out. But again, thank goodness there was some rational tax policy at a national level that generated $1.5 billion that you wouldn't have today if you had listened to these guys.
But didn't a lot of people file their taxes earlier because they were worried about what was going to happen with the taxes?
You know why? Because the state income tax is so high and the deduction's going away that they wanted to preload it. The answer to that is not charitable contributions like you're about to hear right now. The answer to that is get rid of this state income tax like every other rational state in the country is reducing.
I just want to let you gentlemen know your clocks are going to be stopping at 2 minutes. Ned Lamont, go ahead.
I was just going to say that rational tax policy you're mentioning in Washington, D.C. is costing the state of Connecticut over $1 billion with the non-deductibility of state and local taxes. That rational tax policy you're hearing in Washington, D.C. is resulting in trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. Bob, you ought to remember this. We cannot deficit spend. We have to have a balanced budget. So I know your friend Donald Trump says we can borrow until we're blue in the face. We don't do that in Connecticut, and I'm not going to allow it to happen.
Ned, you ought to remember this. Your buddy Dan Malloy has put the highest tax rate in the state of Connecticut over the last 8 years. Our tax independence day is May 3rd. We work from January 1st to May 3rd just to pay our state and local income taxes. It's 2 years longer than any other state in the nation, and it's exactly the economic policy that you want to continue.
And Oz Gribble, did you want to add to this?
Sure, why not? I can't help myself. You cannot run the state of Connecticut like a business. With all due respect, business principles can be applied, household principles can be applied, but you can't outsource an agency to India. You can't eliminate unprofitable customers. That's not what governors do. Government has to fill the void that private sector can't fill. The private sector is a great ally in identifying ideas as to how to get that done. But the idea that you can run government like a business is preposterous. That's not what government is for. It's there to create the environment for job growth, for certain. But it's there to invest in transportation. It's there to invest in education. It's there to help take care of the most vulnerable around us. So this notion that you're going to cut, the thing we all have to remember, I don't know where you're going to cut in the first 2 years when there's no layoff provision through 2021. Go ahead.
Yep,
I'm all done. I'm zeroed out. I got the flag.
You are zeroed out, and I think that we are going to closing statements. Am I right about this? My goodness, we've got 2 minutes before closing statements, and I'm looking right at you, Keisha Grant. A quick question for quick answers.
Gentlemen, as the number of people leaving Connecticut continues to grow, so has the need for the state to bring in more young people into our cities to live and work. What role does government have in supporting our cities for that type of growth?
Mr. Griebel, go ahead.
Two things. First of all, jobs are at the top of the list. What we've said, Monty and I have said, is every decision we make is going to be whether that decision enhances Connecticut's ability to add 200,000 net new private sector jobs over the next 10 years. Growth is the future. We've had no net job growth in 30 years. So jobs are key to attracting and retaining people of all age levels. In terms of the cities, you've got some, I think, Stanford, we're never going to have a Boston or a San Francisco. We don't have the density for that. We've got some very good small-sized cities in this, including a place like Middletown. Are you all done?
One more point, go ahead.
That's stop right there for you.
You'll stop right there. Ned Lamont, thank you very much, Mr. Griebel. Mr. Lamont, go ahead.
Yeah, Keisha, that's why I'm the candidate up here is talking about reducing the property tax. Right now, our cities have the highest property taxes, in the state, and so do many of our small towns. If you want to bring our cities back to life with arts and culture and jobs, we got to do everything we can to keep young people there. There are jobs. There are tens of thousands of jobs we got to fill right now. And the first thing I would do in our smaller towns as well, let's get 5G. Let's get Wi-Fi. Bob, we don't need to do this as taxpayers. We'll get Frontier and the other cable guys to do it. That's the world I come from. That would keep young people here in this state.
Mr. Stefanowski, go ahead.
His number one priority is Wi-Fi. I mean, you really can't make it up. He wants to put a statewide auto tax in. You know who I was endorsed by this week? The Connecticut Association of Realtors, 17,000 people. You think if they liked his property tax plan better than mine, they'd be endorsing me? The realtors are the canary in the coal mine. They see the trends first. They want housing prices to go up. They had a debate 3 weeks ago. They interviewed all three of us. They looked at our tax plans. Who did they pick? The guy who's going to lower taxes and get this economy moving and get the most important asset that most of the people watching the show right now, home values, to start to appreciate. That's what we're going to do.
And now we're on to closing statements. And Mr. Stefanowski, we will stay with you.
Let me take a deep breath.
Take your time.
So, elections are about contrast. You just heard it from Oz. He thinks we should continue to run Connecticut like a government and not have any state fiscal discipline like you use in a business. You've got contrasts and backgrounds. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I was born in New Haven. I went to the public schools. I've run small, medium, and large-size organizations. The state of Connecticut is a $40 billion biannual budget that's broken and needs to be turned around. Ned Lamont ran a small cable company where he laid off 60% of the people and paid himself a $500,000 bonus. That's not the leadership we need. We don't need tolls. We don't need higher taxes. We need somebody who's going to put the taxpayers first, who's going to reduce regulation, and is going to drive this economy so we can invest in healthcare and education and all the things that we need to do. But it's not putting up tolls. It's not yet another tax. It's fundamental change. I'm going to bring that change. These two guys are more of the same.
Mr. Griebel.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I want to make sure you all know that we're rising in the polls. So join the team, jump on the bandwagon because it's starting to get crowded. Vote on November 6th to take Connecticut back from a two-party system that has resulted in 30 years of no net job growth, higher taxes, more taxes, out-migration, and still with taxes, underinvestment in education and transportation. Take Connecticut back from that failed two-party system and elect Monty Frank and me, who will provide the leadership that is focused on Connecticut taxpayers, Connecticut residents, and Connecticut employers, not who's in charge in the Senate or the House, not whether it says R or D on your sweatshirt. The fact that we provide independent leadership to bring both parties together and to bring the private sector in to promote this state and to address our serious fiscal challenges. So on November 6th, go to the bottom line, line 1H, vote the bottom line first before you vote for the other offices. Vote for Oz Griebel and Monty Frank.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lamont.
And after you take a look at the bottom line, come back up to the top line, because you want to have a governor who's going to make the fundamental changes you need to make sure that we solve this structural deficit once and for all and get this economy moving again. And just borrowing from the rainy day fund and deferring pensions is just more of the same. And Bob's just going to make it worse. If you cut $11 billion out of this budget, $1.4 billion for the 400 richest families, you know who's going to pay? You're going to pay. Our cities are going to pay. Our schools are going to pay. The middle class is going to get slammed, and that's no way to get this state going. I would be the first governor in decades, generations who started a business, created jobs, and knows how to work with the business community. It's about that, and it's also about what type of a state you want to be. It's about our Connecticut values. It's about the environment. It's about respecting women. It's about our reproductive rights. It's about guns and making sure that on the 6th anniversary of Sandy Hook, we don't roll back and go with somebody who got a AAA from the NRA.
I'd like to thank all of our candidates, and I would like to thank the Connecticut reporters who joined us on stage to ask questions at Infinity Hall in Hartford. Also thanks to the Connecticut Broadcasters Association for hosting this debate. No matter what line you look at, please vote on November 6th. It's very important. I'm John Dankosky. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, buddy. Here we go. One to go.